Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you are a returning subscriber, thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, and if you're new here, don't forget to hit the subscription button below to subscribe to my channel. So my name is Teresa, and in these contents that I'm putting out is about motherhood, but today I wanted to talk to you about something that I also deem very important, which is credit repair. So if you are interested in repairing your credit, I have 5 tips for you that you should focus on when you are trying to improve your credit score. So the number one on my list when it comes to that is payment history. So the reason why I am putting payment history as number one, because it actually counts for 35% of your credit score. So 35 points, that's about 192 points. So if you were to make your payment history completely perfect, you're paying all your bills on time, you're making sure that you're not late on payments, that you don't have anything in collections, then that counts for the 35%. So just by doing that, just by paying your bills on time, you will earn 192 points that goes toward your credit score. The second thing that you should focus on is called credit utilization. So credit utilization actually is 30% of what counts for your credit score. So 30%, that's about 165 points. So credit utilization, it is more about the credit available that you have. So for example, if you have a credit card and your credit card, let's say, has about $1,000 of credit that you could use. So if you only are using the 30% of that $1,000, then you would be earning about 165 points that goes toward that. But keep in mind, with credit utilization, it doesn't just count for your credit card, it also counts for things like line of credit. So if you have a line of credit and you have a credit card, so then it counts for the 30% of the utilization from both of them together. So let's say if you have only a credit card, for example, your credit card is $1,000. So 30% of that $1,000 would be about $300. I'm gonna get into that in a separate video where I'm gonna break down each of these points. But for now, I just want to give you the introduction and the breakdown on what you should focus on, so that way you guys kind of know the terms of everything before I get into more details. And the more videos I put out about this, the more it's gonna make sense. But for now, let's just focus on the basics as the introduction on what you should focus on. So make sure that your credit utilization is at least 30% or below that. You want to make sure 30% or below that, so that way you can earn that 165 points that goes toward your credit score. The third thing to focus on is called credit age. So credit age is more so about when exactly have you started using credit. So some people have used credit later on, and some people have used it early on. So if you opened like your first line of credit, or you opened your first phone line, if you open your first, let's say, credit card, so then your credit history starts from the date that you opened your first account that is counting toward your credit. So someone who have a history from, let's say, 18-year-old is gonna have a longer history than someone that waited until they're 25 to get their first credit card, or their first line of credit, or their first car loan, right? So credit age is 15%, and that 15% gives you about 82.5 points that goes toward your credit points. The fourth thing is called credit inquiry. So a credit inquiry is basically like anytime you go, let's say if you're going to get a line of a phone line, if you're opening a phone line, what they do is they're checking your credit history. So anytime they go in to check your credit history, that is called an inquiry. So with the credit inquiry, you want to make sure that you have less of those like people checking. So you want to make sure that you're not applying to too many things, because the more they're applying for things, the more they're checking your credit history, it's going to leave an inquiry record on your credit history, which can stay on your report for 7 years. So you want to make sure that you're keeping that number low. So I usually tell people that you shouldn't be applying for more than two things in a 12-month period. So if, let's say, you applied to get a new line of credit, like a credit card, and then you ended up going to a phone company and then they checked your credit history there as well, those are 2 inquiries already. So you want to make sure that you are not doing too many of those in a year. So you want to make sure at least you're doing just like 2, but no more than 2. If you can avoid it, then just stick to 2 things that you are doing per year. The 5th thing is called a credit mix. So a credit mix is basically like the mix of the type of credits that you have. So a credit mix would be something like having a credit card, having a car loan, having a mortgage, having a like a phone line, a mortgage, a credit card, anything that is like they're different. Like those things are basically different types of credits. So the more that you have a mix of credit, the better that it is, and that's gonna give you again 10%, and 10% of that is 55 points. So both the credit increase and the credit mix are both giving you 55 points. And with each of them, with the 55 points, that is about 110 points that goes toward your credit. Remember, the lowest score that you can have in your credit is 300. So if your credit is sitting at like 300 right now, then the good news is it doesn't get any lower than that. It stays at the 300. That's the lowest score that you have. And all those other points that I have mentioned is what's going to add to your credit score. So then for some credit bureaus, the credit score could be 800, and some of them goes as high as 900. For the most part, they stay around 800, depending on which credit bureau that you're checking, whether that is Equifax or TransUnion. They have different scoring models, so therefore their scoring number is going to look different. So for example, like Equifax might be up to 800 is like the maximum amount of credits that you can get, and TransUnion could go as high as 900. I haven't checked both yet, like I can't remember what their numbers are. I have checked it, but I completely forgot. But when I do get that information, I'm going to share it with you guys. So just remember that having a good credit is very important, just because it makes life so much easier. And for the most part, people who don't have good credits, those people really struggle when it comes to like a need. Like when something comes up in their life and they really need something, then they really struggle to get it. So let's say if you want to go and borrow a car, you want to get a loan because your car broke down. If you don't have a good credit history, what's going to happen is either you are going to get denied from a car loan, or the second thing that's going to happen is that you may get approved, but then get approved for some ridiculous interest. So people who have bad credit are going to be charged more interest than people that have good credit. So people who have good credit are actually saving money because they're getting all these like loans and lines of credit for lower amount than people who have bad credit. So someone with a good credit could get a car loan with an interest rate, let's say for example, of like 4%. But then if you have bad credit, I've seen people get it as high as 14%. The difference between a 4% interest rate and a 14% interest rate, that means the person with the 14 interest rate, even if their terms of the loan is the same amount of years, so let's say if they're both paying it for a 5-year period, at the end of that 5 years, the person with the 4% interest rate is going to end up paying a much lower percentage than the person who is at the 14% interest rate, because that person with the 14 interest rate is going to basically pay almost triple of the interest rate that the person A have paid, which is why having good credit is very important. So if your goal for this year is to work on your credit and you want to enter 2025 with a much better credit, then you need to figure out exactly what is wrong in your credit, right? So the number one thing I always tell people who are actually serious about improving their credit and they want to take that route, before you even get into like these payment history, credit utilization, credit mix, credit age, credit increase, what you want to do first, the number one thing that you should do first is you need to pull your credit report. Luckily, you can actually get your credit report for free in Canada once a year from Equifax and from TransUnion. That is actually, it's a legal obligation that they have to do when you ask for it. So if you were to call Equifax and say, hey, I would like you guys to send me my credit report, here's my address, they will send it to you. But they can do that only once a year. So let's say if you applied for it this May, then you have until the following year in May to reapply and to repull your credit again. So you get one free report per year, and you can do the same thing with TransUnion. A lot of people don't know that, and they think that, oh, like, I would have to pay, or they might not give me access to my report, or whatever the case is. And I'm here to tell you that these are things that you can get for free. I also suggest to people that if you are serious about doing this, then you would need to pull it from both credit bureaus. So in Canada, the two credit bureaus that are used whenever you're getting a loan, whenever your credit is getting checked, when you're trying to get like a phone line, when you're trying to buy a new car, when you're trying to apply for a mortgage, they're either going to look at Equifax or TransUnion, depending on the company. Some of them use TransUnion, some of them use Equifax, which is why I always tell people that when you are pulling your report, the best thing that you can do for yourself is pull it from both of them. Why am I saying both of them? Because both of them may have different information. So a collection account that is sitting on your Equifax might not show up in your TransUnion, and a collection account that is sitting in your TransUnion might not show up on your Equifax, which is why you want to pull both reports to see exactly what are they saying about you on this report. So that's the first thing that you want to do, is you want to pull your report out and figure out exactly what is your report saying. What are they saying about you? What is Equifax saying about you? What is TransUnion saying about you? And that way, if there is any inaccurate information, then you would need to dispute it. And when you are disputing inaccurate information, you want to make sure that you go to both of them, right? So if the dispute is going to be in regards to something that is in your Equifax, then you would have to contact Equifax and get that resolved. And if an inaccuracy is sitting in your TransUnion, then you would have to contact TransUnion to have that fixed. If the same information is sitting on both the report and you only report it to one of them and not the other, it's only going to fix one side of the issue, but it's not automatically going to fix in your TransUnion. So if it's ended up getting fixed in your Equifax is not going to contact TransUnion and be like, hey, like, we have inaccurate information on this person, can you also fix it on your end? They don't communicate like that. They are completely two different companies. Therefore, you would have to communicate with both of them when you see any type of inaccuracy in your report. I did have run into that issue when I was fixing someone's credit before, and I asked them at the beginning, like, hey, like, if you want me to fix your credit report, are we doing it on both or just one? And then this person was like, no, just focus on just the one and not the other. So then I ended up only focusing on the one that they had specifically asked for, which is Equifax. And then later on, when one side of their credit report is getting improved, which is Equifax, they ended up finding information when they ended up logging into TransUnion and opening an account, and then they found an inaccurate information there. So then they're contacting me like a few months later, like, hey, why is this information in my TransUnion? And then I explained to them, hey, like, when I was working on your credit, remember, we were only working on the one company, which was Equifax. We did not work on both of them. It was only the one side that we were focusing on, which is what you wanted to do. So that is something that you need to know as well. When you're fixing it on one end, it's not automatically going to fix on the other credit bureau. So it only fixes on the one that you have contacted. So once you pull your credit report, then you can go through your credit profile. So your credit profile is gonna have things like if you have a credit card, it's gonna show up there. It's gonna show how much credit limit that you have on your credit card, and it's gonna also show, like, if you have any late payments on that credit card. It's gonna show the balance, because it does get updated every time you get your report. Like, from, let's say, your credit card sends a bill, they do end up sending that report directly to the credit bureau that they're reporting to. Sometimes they could report to both, sometimes they only report to one. So when they send out your information, then it's gonna show up, like, so every month that information is gonna change. So let's say it's gonna say, this person has a credit limit of $5,000, and in this month they ended up using $1,000 out of their limit, so they owe $1,000. And for the past 12 months they have been paying their bill on time, or if there's any missed payment, then it's going to show as a missed payment. So that's what you want to check, is you want to check, like, your profile, to check, like, the credit cards that you have on file and what is saying about that credit file. It's also going to show the credit utilization. The credit utilization is what I talked about in my second point, which counts for 30% of where your points is coming from. So your credit utilization is going to show up on your report, and it's going to show exactly how much of your available credit have you been using. Have you been using 30% or more than that? If you're using anything that is more than 30%, then you are losing points from your credit. So the fastest way, I will always tell people, the fastest way to increase your credit is you want to focus on the first two things that I brought up, which is the payment history. 35% of that is going is your points is coming from, which is 192 points. The second thing is you want to pay attention to your credit utilization, which is 30%. So 30% of that you want to focus on getting those points, which is 165 points. Just by focusing on those two things, you're already gaining more than 300 points. Literally just by focusing on just the first two things, because those are where the most points is coming from. And then you can start working on credit age. Credit age is not really something you can control, because you decided to get credit when you decided to get credit. So if you decided to get it at 18 instead of 25, then you're going to have a longer history. But if you waited until 25, that's not something that you can change. So let's say you started using credit at 25, and now 5 years later you're at 30. So your credit age is not something that you can control. That's a decision that you made, and that's what's gonna show. But just continue to use credit, and then you're gonna gain more points. This is why a lot of people who are seniors actually have a higher credit score because of the credit age. Because if they're in their like 65, right? At that point, a lot, they manage their bill well, or they learn to manage their bill well by that point. And also they have a long history because they're like 65, right? So they have a much longer credit age than someone who would be 20 or 25. And then the credit inquiry, again, it's going to show also on your credit report any credit increase. So if you went to TELUS, if you went to Bell, if you went to Rogers, and they did a credit check on you, it's going to show the date that they have done a credit check on your report. So it's going to show there, and you would be losing point depending on who's doing the check. Sometimes you're not losing that much point. Sometimes it could be like 5 points. Sometimes it's like 3 points down, right? So you want to make sure that you are not using too many of the credit of your credit inquiries. So try to only apply for 2 things a year. And if you don't need to apply for anything, then just don't do it. Just avoid it at all costs, because that's going to keep your credit inquiries low, right? And then the credit mix, again, credit mix is just trying to get different type of credit. So even if you're not using it, I still tell people that try to do it anyways. So when it comes to like let's say if you have a credit card and you are able to get approved for a loan, even if it's like $1,000 line of credit or $2,000 line of credit, then just get it anyways. You don't have to touch it, you don't have to use it, right? But just have it there, so that way it could be part of your credit mix, right? And the good thing about having available credit that you're not using is that it's going to reduce your credit utilization when you're not using it. So for example, if you have for example $1,000 credit card, and then from that $1,000 credit card, actually let's go with 2,000. So let's say you have 2,000 credit card. From the 2,000 credit card, you ended up using $1,000 that month. So that means your utilization on your credit card is 50%, because you have $2,000, and out of the 2,000 you ended up using $1,000. But then let's say you also have a line of credit. So then your line of credit, you have also 2,000 there, but you're not touching your line of credit. So what's going to happen with your line of credit, it's going to reduce your overall utilization. So instead of having a 50% utilization because you use 50% of your credit card, it's going to reduce your overall utilization to only 25%, because that means you used $1,000 out of your available 4,000 credit. I hope that makes sense. I'm trying to keep the numbers low because I'm not good at math. Don't judge me, right? Math is not my strongest pursuit. But yeah, so if you ended up using $1,000, but in total between the credit card and the line of credit is a $4,000 combined, that means your credit utilization is literally going to drop from 50% to 25%. I noticed that when I ended up getting my line of credit, and it ended up reducing my credit utilization like in a big way. And then I ended up earning a lot of points because my utilization just like dropped because I have more available credit, which ended up reducing from my utilization. So those are the things that you want to focus on. So just to review again, the number one thing that you need to do is you want to pull your report and check out what these credit bureaus are saying about you. So if you're in Canada, you want to focus on Equifax and TransUnion. The second thing that you want to do is review your credit report and then see if there's anything sitting in collections, if there is anything that is showing as late payment, if there's any information that is inaccurate, you want to dispute it, you want to contact them and make sure you dispute it. And then once you have make sure that everything is correct on your report, then you want to focus on payment history, credit utilization, credit age, credit inquiry, and credit mix. So then start focusing on those things. Try to target the big numbers, which is the payment history and the credit utilization. Focus on those two, and then slowly work on the other three as well. So that is my advice to you. So in more videos, I'm going to talk about each of these points one by one, and why these credit bureaus are focusing on those 5 things, like the importance of those 5 things. So make sure that you are subscribing to my channel. Leave a comment if you have any questions about anything. Make sure you like these videos so that way it could appear in other people's feed. And if you have any questions, comments, make sure you comment it below. And again, do not forget to subscribe. Do not forget to subscribe. And you can also hit the notification bell below, which is going to notify you anytime I put new contents. So yes, this is my first video. This is just an intro. I'm going to get into more details about all of this information later on, but right now this is just an introduction to let you guys know like what are some of the contents that I'll be putting out about credit repair. And then another thing that I also want to bring up is that if you have any ideas or if you have any questions or content that you specifically want me to put it out, make sure you also leave a comment there, and I would love to review it and see if it's something that I could do. So once again, thank you so much for tuning in, and enjoy your day. Thank you.